Today's guest is Dr. T.A.Watson. From Rags to Success story, he has inspired and motivated millions of people in his experience as a star athlete, a corporate manager, effective school leader, and a successful entrepreneur. And a variety of people have called him Dr. Inspiration. He is an author of many books as well as a future producing film of his life. Please give a warm welcome to ever-blessed Dr. T.A.Watson. I would like to apologize in advance for the muddy recording and microphone difficulties.
Jasmine, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing great. About yourself?
Very well, thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, I was in Atlanta, Georgia a few months ago. First time that it's a quite interesting city. It's beautiful.
Yeah, great city, big city, lots of traffic. Horrible traffic. But not too bad though.
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. So it's Dr. T.A.Watson. And I do apologize also because I'm not much of a sports fan, but so don't be insulted if I ask you questions that I just don't know much about. Is it football and so forth? So, but I love football. I just don't know everybody on the team. I just yell at the screen and say,
No problem. Everything is fair game. So I'll teach you about the game of football. You'll know about football once we get finished here.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that'd be great. And I have a couple of questions that I wanted to ask of you. And it might not be in order. So it was just kind of a random, like, that's something I would love to know, as well as the listeners. I know that we haven't hit on subjects in regards to your background. And I mean, you just looking at your website and reading your bio and watching your YouTube, I actually teared up when I saw your YouTube in regards to your life story. And one of the things that I did enjoy, after all that, it kind of came out that you inspired me even more to the point where I think I signed up for your Tommy letter. I think it's
awesome.
lettertommy.com. So that was a couple days ago that I signed up for that, because I'm like, you know what? I think I need to do something like that. I have been struggling a lot with childhood trauma, and it's kind of roadblocked my success and my thought process on how to become successful and kind of become, leap and bounds over those obstacles that they're probably self-made now that I'm an adult, but they come directly from just the type of childhood background that I had. And I'm not sure if you've ever viewed any of my other podcasts, but I did kind of do like a little bit tidbits of things about my life. Your story of your life, I'm a very emotional person. So to see what you have gone through, it just brings back a lot of my memories. I've moved around multiple times, and that's because my parents were in the military. But in between that time, my mother was married multiple times, and I was kind of a latchkey kid. So I didn't have the parenting. It was parenting, in the household. So it was like pretty much like a survival mode at a young age. So, but there was just a lot of things that I had gone through as well, and I wanted to share.
Thank you for sharing that. And, everyone has a story, and I really appreciate you, getting to a place where you're willing to share your story, because someone can benefit from hearing your story. And even my story for many years, Jasmine, it was painful to talk about. It was embarrassing. And I actually didn't want to talk about it. And God brought me to a place where he was able to use me and use my story to be able to help other people. So I've been on a mission to do that since I left college. And like I said, I'm glad to be here sharing it with you today as well.
Yeah. I loved the thought that you had siblings and you were able to support each other through the struggles that you have gone through. But I didn't have that. And so I became pretty much everyone, the mother that was not in the picture, the father that I dreamt in my mind to be this perfect dad, this wonderful man who I visioned to have maybe down the road as the opposite of what my father is. So I had all these building blocks as to what I didn't want in my life and went out to get it. But it's like, there's a lot of things that kind of conflict with what do you want and what is actual, especially when you don't have the building blocks, the proper building blocks, the healthy growth, the development of your psyche, your just ability to do anything because you have society against you because you are a person of color. I was a single mom in high school. So I didn't have, that was an interesting thing too. So, but just a little tidbit on what I had gone through. And when I was watching your video, I just wanted to give you this hug, even though, I wasn't there to, I'm getting teared up there. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. Just talking about yours, it's making me more emotional because I've numbed my reality, but to see people also going through that type of suffering at a young age, it hurts me because I have 3 boys. So Absolutely. I see a man who is a man of color, and he is, my sons are also children who are going to be men of color. And just the thought of having you go through that, it's almost like a statistic that has almost like become a norm. And I really want you to inspire other people who are struggling with that same type of mentality where they're in that situation, they don't feel like they can get out of it. And you are an inspirational story for a lot of people. So I want to make sure that I reach out to the men out there. And because I don't have that many men listeners, I think I've had maybe 1 or 2 who are guests. And yeah, I want more of this. I want to inspire us to lift each other up specifically. Sure. So some of the questions that I had.
I love your first question, by the way.
Yes.
That was a great question. That really got me excited there.
Yes, because that was kind of like what I'm trying to lead up to. Even though I'm pulling back the tears, you can probably hear in my voice, I'm choking up a little bit. But I wanted to know, what is the biggest misperception of you in your life journey as a Black man?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jasmine. I was excited when I first came across that question. There's probably 2 misperceptions. One, people hear me as Dr. Tommy Watson today. They'll assume that I didn't go through any struggles in life. And then for those folks who know my struggles, they assume that I went through those struggles unscathed. So, a little backdrop on my story for your listening audience. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. My mother and father were drug addicts and shoplifters who were arrested a total of 121 times by the time I finished high school. So as a kid, I spent a lot of time in foster homes, crisis centers, motel rooms, bouncing from place to place to place, living with different friends and family members, and really, not feeling worthy of anything in my life. And I tried to join the gang when I was in 3rd grade. My aunt was pretty smart, got me involved in basketball. By the time I was in 7th grade, we got kicked out of our house in front of all of our friends. And the community went into our yard and took all of our stuff. And my family of 9 of us moved into 1 motel room for my entire year of school. And during this time, the thing that kept me going was sports. And I kept playing basketball. Ended up getting an opportunity to go to a private suburban Denver high school, which is one of the top ones in the state of Colorado. But my mother and father were against me going to the school, but they ended up going back to prison at the end of my 8th grade year of school. So I moved, me and my little brother and little sister moved with my grandmother, my other grandmother, and moved in with her. And my grandmother's wish was to go out to high school every day. So by the time I was in 8th grade, my neighborhood was being called Little Compton in Denver because all the gangs that had migrated from LA were now coming out to Colorado. And my grandmother, she didn't have much money, so she moved us into the heart of our neighborhood. And I was taking 3 city buses one way to high school every morning, starting at 6:30 in the morning. And going out to this predominantly white high school, very affluent school where the kids, when they went skiing on the weekends, they went to resorts their parents either owned or partially owned. And here I am, coming in, taking 3 city buses from their cities. So that was a struggle in itself. By my junior year of high school, my grandmother had developed Alzheimer's disease. So she eventually had to be placed into a nursing home. And during this time, I'm bouncing around from place to place to place. My mom comes out of prison. She's no longer doing drugs, no longer stealing to take care of herself. And she wants to do the right thing, but no one would give her a second chance. So my mother eventually turned to selling drugs to take care of us. And in the middle of my senior year of high school, I received a daunting call at school. My mother was busted for selling drugs and was on her way back to prison again. So in the midst of my senior year of high school, about being recruited as one of the top football players in America, my mother went back to prison. My little brother was on his way to prison. My oldest brother was now coming back around, who I met by pure coincidence in a foster home in second grade, because even the same gang as my little brother. My oldest sister was on the streets on crack cocaine. My second oldest sister was in foster care in Iowa. My younger sister lived with my aunt. And I was literally homeless for the last 6 months of my senior year of high school, bouncing around from place to place to place, hoping that I could just barely graduate from high school and eventually, go on and play football for the University of Minnesota. And my goal was to get to the NFL. And I thought getting to the NFL was going to bring me happiness and joy. And I ended up getting injured. So the NFL dream didn't happen. But I knew I couldn't go back to my situation. I left in Denver. So it forced me to go on and get my education. Went on, became a school principal, got 4 degrees, and left being a principal about 11 years ago to start my own business, speaking, coaching, and consulting. And, it's been a blessing to be able to share my story. So we started talking about those misperceptions. A lot of people assume that, hear Dr. Tommy Watson, they'll say, hey, you must have had it pretty good. You're your doctor. But at the same time, even my family members who know my story, they say, we're so proud of you. You went through this with, and you look pretty good, but they don't recognize the internal wounds that existed with me for many, many years, in particular in college. I fell into a deep state of depression in college and even contemplating suicide for a moment because the wounds were so deep and I didn't have anyone to speak to about it. So my writing of my books has been the form of therapy that really saved my life. So we started talking about those assumptions that people make. And again, we talked about your story. Everyone has a story. We all have a story. We've had to overcome something in life. And there's a benefit to someone out there in terms of our society to hear your story. So again, I never would have thought in a million years when I got off that bus in 1992 going to the University of Minnesota, after spending 22 hours on the Greyhound bus crying about where I came from, that my story would ever be used in a way to help inspire or do anything for anyone else. So it's a blessing to be able to know that I've been on lots of media across the country and conferences across the country, speaking to others, motivated with my story. So it's a blessing.
Yes, it is. And it's an honor to have you here on my podcast. I mean, out of your busy schedule, I thank you so much for sharing this, because this is something that is duly needed for any type of community, specifically for the persons of color community, Black men specifically, if you want to narrow it even more. But like you said, you mentioned it, you have a couple of books out here, and you actually have another one that's coming out, or has it already come out?
So I have another one coming out in January. It's called Leaping from W-2 to 1099. So for those individuals who want to go from employee to entrepreneurship, there's 22 things that I give you on my journey that you must do to be a successful entrepreneur. So I'm excited to launch that in January. So be on the lookout for that. And then my other book, The Face of Courage, of course, is about my story. Award-winning book. It's also been turned into a movie. The movie has won 7 awards on the Short Film Festival, and we're in talks with folks in Hollywood now to see if we can actually get it to a feature film or something grander later on. So we'll see what happens with that as well.
Wow. This is wonderful. Congratulations. I love that. I love to hear that your life has inspired to be used to reach across the globe for other people to be inspired as well. So that is awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So your background with your siblings and you being from, like, literally, like you said, from, hotel to family.
Motel, not even hotel. Well, I'm in a hotel now. Hotels are pretty nice.
Yeah.
Motels are not nice.
Yeah. From motel to, having your siblings dispersed in amongst different parts of the community and losing that connection with your family and being separated from your parents because of the types of choices that they decided to make in their lives, and to being university and homeless and NFL. I mean,
I got hurt before I got to the NFL. I was on my way there, but I got hurt before I got there. So I didn't quite make it to the NFL.
Oh my gosh. Probably like something that you wanted to do, your passion, your way out of the type of environment that you were brought up in. That was like the gleaming hope for you. But I think, if you believe in a higher power, that was the direction you needed to go. But then there was a sharp left in the process of that. And that was exactly where you were supposed to be at the right time. It's unfortunate that you were injured in the process, but
yes.
One of the questions, because I know like the NFL, like I just mentioned in the beginning, because I wanted to ask you exactly like, would you rather be the best player on a horrible team or the worst player on a great team? And that could be, I guess, in regards to like even life itself, but so you can take any direction you'd like to answer that question.
My daily philosophy is to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. So I like setting the tone and not necessarily being dealt the tone that I'm in. So I would definitely not want to be the worst player on a good team. I would probably want to be the best player on a struggling team in hopes that I'll bring the struggling team eventually on to become a good team. So my goal has never been to be the worst of anything, although I have been the worst, in particular in the sport of golf now. I am the worst every time I step on the golf course, but my goal is always to be the best. So I prefer to be the best versus the worst.
Right. Yeah. Well, golf is definitely not the forte. I can't even, it's not even in my dictionary, but I'm glad you actually are accomplishing to look good in the process of doing that.
All right. That's the big goal on the golf course. Look good, not necessarily good.
Exactly. So what was the other thing? Oh, so if you could disappear or reappear at any point in time, when and where would that be?
Yeah, that's another good question. There's no better time than now to be alive. As thankful as I am for my journey, for where I came from, I would never want to go back and live those moments because it was really so painful. I can laugh about it today, but I remember just being, in such moments of despair and hopelessness at times growing up. I mean, can you imagine that the people who bring you into this world, your parents, are not there for you. One of my the movie piece that I'm pitching to Hollywood, there's a series that I'm calling Resilient Below Poverty. People say, well, Dr. Watson, what's below poverty? And I tell them homelessness. So when I was in middle school and my siblings and my brother and I were going to this middle school together, the school bus would go get all my friends from the projects who were, and I'm not minimizing that situation. It's tough, living in single parent households, but they were all coming from the same environment. They were all pretty much in a stable environment, even though they were government supported. We were coming in from a motel room where the school didn't have our address. No one had our telephone number. We wouldn't get any government assistance because my parents were involved in legal activities. And, we didn't eat oftentimes at the motel room. So our meals came at school. Our clothes were dirty. I remember even in second grade, Jasmine, we returned to a motel room that we were living in. Because again, we lived in 7, not just visit overnight. We lived, all of our stuff was in them. We returned to one motel room. I remember my dad going up to the door and tried to put the key in the door and it wouldn't work. And he turned to the owner who was outside and he said, hey, what's going on with the door? And the owner said, you guys haven't paid rent, get out of here. Wow. And my father went back and forth and he finally said, get out of here before I call the police. And right then that was a sign that we had to go. And Jasmine, we literally, I was in second grade. We literally walked away from that motel room, got back into the car. We left everything we owned in that motel room and went down the street to the next motel room and had to start life all over again.
Wow.
I tell people when you start talking about homelessness is quite different than being in poverty. Oftentimes my friends in the projects, they grew up in the projects their whole lives. That's tough. But at least you had a place to stay. I mean, we were returning home. We didn't know where we were going to stay at, didn't know where my parents were going to be at. Even right now in the city of Charlotte, we have 5,000 families, that go to sleep in shelters, cars, motel rooms, crisis centers every night. That is a completely different beast than simply growing up in the projects. So that's the world that I want to introduce the nation and the world to in terms of what it's like to grow up and be homeless. Because for the most part, you are invisible when you are dealing with homelessness. And, we think about the folks who live on the streets, on corners, and that's tough as well, though. But there are families who aren't necessarily on the streets, but they're living in motel rooms. They're living in crisis centers, and if, when I was a principal, I used to tell my colleagues a lot, try not to suspend kids who were homeless. Not that you let them off the hook, but for the most part, when you have a kid who's homeless, who lives in the shelter, during the day, they have to get out of the shelter. So now where does that kid go? You suspended them, they're on the streets kind of walking around, So as much as, when I was a principal, I pride myself on doing a lot of things, holding kids accountable for things that they could be suspended for in the building. And we only had one suspension my entire year. But I think, we as a society got to think of creative ways and do more to deal with kids who are in the foster care system who are dealing with homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, my son chose to be homeless. It's really interesting because I brought him up to respect all culture, respect all persons, their living conditions, their living status. I was raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. If you know where Milwaukee is, I lived down a street where the alley was called Murder Alley because every night there was a body either in a dumpster or someone shot up, some gang related conflict. I was between Latin Kings and, the GDs and the 2-4s and the Bloods and, whoever wanted to go up in there. So I've dealt with that for like 15, 20 years of my life when I was young. And I started running with that stuff too, off and on, got in trouble. I was in treatment centers, detentions. I was actually going to be heading off into prison by the age of 15. But luckily, I had a attorney. So during that time, I did the, running away out of group homes, treatment centers, foster homes. It was a interesting tidbit. And when I became a young mother, my first thing that I did is completely the opposite of what my mother has taught me, because I learned what not to do. I taught him to enrich himself with culture and art and music and people and loving, unconditional, all walks of life, all living conditions of whoever. And I've even had moments where we would sleep out and do fundraisers for the homeless. And so we slept out and camped out and did that. We even walk against family violence. I mean, so I had made sure that he understood that no matter what walk of life a person is, no matter how low they are still people, and you need to respect them. And I wanted to grow, teach him to be a man. Once that time comes, he has the proper tools that if I had it, that's something that a lot of our kids are lacking. And he didn't have a father in his life. I had to so-called man up what I could do with the resources that I was provided.
Sure.
So, I completely understand what you have gone through. And he chose to be homeless at the age of 18. And he respects life so much more, knowing that from his perspective, how people who are homeless, they are people. They're not. He noticed that a lot of others who walk past a family or a man or a woman on the street, they're invisible. They're invisible people, and this is something that's broken in our society. No matter everybody has had their low. Some have been lower than others, but that doesn't mean that they become obsolete and not part of, So, I'm going to ramble on. So you got to stop me because I will keep going.
Amen. I'll give you amen to that. Yes.
So, yes, I'm really enjoying you sharing this with me and the listeners. Thank you so much for this. Now, because I know I love your website because it's like I can pick and choose, but there's so much that I want to tackle. No pun intended. Good
one. See, always good.
Yes, there's so much that I want to just grasp onto. It will take me maybe 2 days to go through this, but I think as a cliff note, I would love to run down a couple of things on here that really kind of catches my eye. And I know that we talked about your books. We also discussed about you being a doctor, and I want to find out more about that. I don't know if anybody else has touched on that subject with you on any other podcasts or any other types of speaking engagements, but is there something that you would love to share with the listeners? I think if you want to put that in closing, I can ask these questions now, and then we can do something in closing if you wanted to share something that you weren't able to do in previous situations.
Okay. Oh, you're doing a great job. You mentioned my siblings over and over again.
Yes.
Questions about my siblings.
Yes,
and
sir.
I'll tell you, as tough as it was growing up, then there's 6 of us total. There was never a time we all lived together as kids. We were always in different foster homes, and which was very unfortunate. But for the bulk, when I was in 2nd grade, there was 5 of us who did live together. We had a baby sister, and I think the struggle that we had during that time was, so my siblings and I, we were very, very close because of the struggles. And I remember in 2nd grade, we had a 1-year-old baby sister, and in Jasmine, we were literally, my older sister was in 6th grade, would stay at home while my other sister was in 5th grade. I was in 2nd grade, my little brother in 1st grade. We would actually go to school because we didn't have any food at home. So my parents would leave us for days by ourselves with a little baby. Not just hours, but I'm talking about we wouldn't see my parents for a week and a half sometimes. So we were on our own. So we would literally go to school, Jasmine, not necessarily to learn, but to steal food. And we would steal food and make sure we had enough we brought back for our sisters when we got home. We were going on weekends, we were going to grocery stores and steal food. I'm talking about stealing food. I'm talking about grocery stores. We would grab candy bars and cupcakes and chips. That's what we were living off of as kids, taking care of ourselves. So my siblings and I were very, very close because of the struggles that we had to go through. But I'd also say that those struggles were very, very painful for my 2 older sisters because they were in the foster care system as young teenage girls. They didn't have the protection over them. My brother and I, we were boys, we were going through it. So we were, it was a little bit different for us. We could, if someone tried to do something to us, the 2 of us could physically protect ourselves. But my sisters, they didn't have that ability oftentimes. So they went through a lot. And still breaks my heart today, knowing that there was no one there to cover them as they were enduring these things, as you're going through, these different foster homes and what have you. And, there are moments where we're all together, having happy moments, and then next year, this person's over in this foster home, this person's over here, because we all have different dads as well. So they were this part of the family. So it was tough. It was tough, but today we have a great appreciation and love for each other because of that. And 2 of my siblings left Denver and actually live in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I'm at as well. And 2 of my brothers, the 2 of them, they've started a trucking business together. So nice. We value family. We unfortunately lost our older sister last year, but we've all been very, very close on our journey. Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry about your sister. My heart goes out. As you can see, I am tearing up, especially when you talk about your sisters being in the foster system, because that's exactly where I was too. Fighting tooth and nail, just fighting to keep them off me, fighting to keep my head up high, fighting to get out of the system, fighting. And, it's, yeah.
I have one of my podcast guests. I have a podcast as well called Resilient Stories.
Oh, okay.
Her story was actually on Lifetime. I'm drawing a blank on her name right now, but she grew up living in 39 different foster homes, and wow. She was abused in a lot of them. And she felt like, I think the name of her movie was called Nobody's Child or something like that. And finally, there was she was adopted later on in life, and it just meant so much to her because she felt like she had to just fight everywhere she went. And even in school, she got in a lot of trouble fighting because she had no one there to protect her as she was going through the system. So she had to become a fighter physically and mentally to make it out of the system. So kudos to you for being where you are. And I know my sisters had to deal with a lot of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of times that I've talked with other guests who always say, I've talked to an indigenous sister of mine, we always talk about, constantly fighting for fight. And someone always goes and says, oh my gosh, you're so resilient. And like, well, yeah, but I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting. I don't want to be resilient. I shouldn't be even doing this in the first place. But yes. So yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that your brothers and sisters are doing well for themselves. And I'm sorry about your sister passing last year. So yeah, I'm trying not to. I always think like if I ever had any siblings, I would be just torn apart, and I wouldn't know how to even. I'll be inconsolable, I guess.
I'll just say this right here. My older sister, she eventually turned to crack cocaine. I remember literally in high school, I'd be getting off the bus coming from this school where I was being showcased around the country from this football player. And I'd literally get off the bus coming back home to my neighborhood. And there was my older sister on the streets, doing crack cocaine and prostituting herself. But even in those moments, though, I still went up to her all the time and gave her a big kiss and told her how much I loved her and how much I appreciated her, because she was my hero growing up as a kid. She was the one who kept us, even as a sixth grader. She was taking on a lot of parental duties as a sixth grader.
Right.
And unfortunately, she didn't have anyone to turn to, so she eventually turned to drugs in the streets. But I was just so proud of her. Even before she passed away, she was working jobs. She was trying to do some things. So I was her biggest cheerleader, and the memories I have of her, and there's only in my book, A Face of Courage, there's only one time where I refer to someone as being a hero. And that was my older sister, Melinda. She was my hero growing up as a kid. Despite the drugs and prostitution and everything else, she was an amazing person, So I tell people sometimes, we can see the behaviors of people and we look at the behaviors and we judge them on those behaviors. But sometimes there are things that are taking their place. We have to learn how to start seeing deeper beyond the behaviors and really kind of discover who the person is behind those behaviors, because everyone has a why and a reason behind what they do. And everyone has a story. So my sister, Melinda Watson, amazing person, despite the drugs and everything else that she went through. She was an amazing human being, had a great heart. And her memories will always live with me forever. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's good.
Yeah, I think as I'm getting older, I don't hold back on my emotions anymore.
And, it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be emotional. Sometimes in our society, we're told not to be, but it's okay. We need to release them at the appropriate time. So appreciate your transparency and honesty.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. So if I could hit on some other subjects, if you don't mind. I know there's some that I didn't have the prep questions for, and I think, like I said, I mentioned before, you had that, is it the letter to Tommy?
Yes.
I'd love to hit on that subject as well as anything else like you have here. Like you just have a variety of beautiful categories that you have your hands involved in, so many positive things. And I just want to just do at least some impression, or, indentation of this on the podcast, because if the listeners are listening into this, it doesn't matter what time, I really strongly suggest that y'all need to go to your website. I mean, you have your coaching program, you have courses and training, you have events that are going on, you have and of course your podcast, like you mentioned, and your books. I mean,
Jasmine, I mentioned one thing. One of the ones I'm probably most excited. The letter to younger Tommy started out years ago when I was asked if I were able to go back and say something to my younger self, what would I say? And I thank you for opening up, saying that you would have wanted to give that little Tommy a hug. And when I thought about that younger Tommy, that's what I kept imagining in my mind. How can I give this young man a hug and tell him that it's going to be okay? Can you imagine my third grade living in numerous foster homes, crisis centers, motel rooms? You're talking about a hopeless kid there. How can I just hug this kid? So my letter was a lot about trying to encourage my younger self and letting my younger self know that it's going to be okay. But at the same time, my letter to my younger self was also speaking to the many other individuals out there who are currently going through those situations now. So over the years, I've been able to coach a lot of people on how to take their stories and turn into successful businesses. So one of the things I launched back in November was my course, called a $1 Million Business Pathway. So it's merged from the letter to $1 Million Business Pathway. And there's three aspects of the coaching program that we have. One, I believe everyone's purpose in life is connected to your story. Oftentimes we look for our purpose out here, and our purpose is right here next to us. It's been with us the entire time. And what we learn is that what we know and what we've gone through have become experiences, and we become an expertise in that. So I tell people, you already have a PhD in your story. You don't necessarily have to go back to school and do like I did, but you already have a PhD in your story, because no one knows it better than that. So in my coaching program, I help people take their story, develop the lessons learned from the story, create multiple streams of income around that, and create a successful business, which I've been able to do over the last several years to create a 7-figure business. I had one client who lost his job in the midst of COVID. He came to me and was literally lost his job once COVID hit, and was able to take these strategies and created a $500,000 business in less than a year. So one of the great things about finding your purpose in life is that your purpose is already there with you. And it's a matter of doing what you just said, Jasmine, really reflecting, evaluating, analyzing your story, learning how to tell your story, finding out who your marketplace is for your story, who the people can benefit from your story, and then finding the different ways to share your story. Over the years, I've been able to share mine through books, even most recently movies. But also, I forgot to see this clip, though. I've also rapped. I did a rap on the theme song. Can you believe that? Yeah, it was horrible, but I wasn't horrible. People liked it, but it was tough. Uh-huh. So I actually rapped the theme song for the movie as well. So it's called Resilient as well. So when I go to schools, when I'm talking to schools, when I go to most places and talk, I usually throw in there that I'm a rapper, and people say, no. So I tell the kids, you can be a rapper and a doctor at the same time. So, it's okay to pursue both. Yeah. But, in the individuals out there who want to find ways to further explore their stories, I would really encourage them to go to my website, T.A.Watson.com. Check out my $1 Million Business Pathway program and see if it's a program for you. And, consider jumping in there. It's a program that, we've helping a lot of people out with it, and again, there's nothing like living in a place of purpose. I walked away from my, one of the things we're seeing in our society right now is we're seeing the great resignation. There are people who are very, very tired of working jobs where they're not getting meaning out of it. They're not getting paid for. There's no work-life balance, So one of the great things I discovered once I walked away from my job many years ago as a school principal was that I was able to tap into a world of consulting and all these other, creating an information business. So an information business is there is information that we already have from our experiences in us. It's a matter of creating and putting them in a business format. And that there are people that are willing to pay you, not by the hour, but by the value that you present when it comes to your information, your knowledge. And it becomes a great resource you can utilize and take care of yourself. And then, something you can leave a legacy with and make a difference on, because again, you're going to jobs. You have a lot of people in the country right now. I think 85% of Americans actually hate the jobs they go to every day. So why not find a place where you create the work that you love doing and do it daily? So it's a great place.
I also dug into that a little bit more in regards to the Great Resignation. It's hitting a lot of people, but I is also identified that it's not hitting. It hits differently in regards to people of color because they don't have the opportunity to let go of their job that have been part of the Great Resignation because they have family, they have the struggle of, keeping their finances in check. There's a lot of other different nuances on the reason why they cannot be part of that. And here you are saying that, that should be completely obsolete. If you're wanting to do it. And and we all have the ability to do. Like you said,
I resigned. It was 11 years ago, when I resigned from my job. And again, I went flat broke 6 months after leaving my job. And I remember bringing my family to a family huddle saying, hey, you know what? Because for me, it was important for me to be at a place where I felt God was calling me to do. So I walked away from making $120,000 a year as a principal, had job security. My family's loved me. My staff enjoyed me. The district loved me. They wanted me to be superintendent. But for me, my purpose was calling me to a different direction. And all I wanted to do was inspire people, and I wanted to go home. So I walked away from that, and people thought they thought I was nuts. Even though my brokest days, they were saying, what's plan B? And I said, there is no plan B. This plan A. This is going to work at some point in time. So I brought my family together in a huddle. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to just go jump into another job just to maintain what we have here. I said, we were in a 3,000 square foot house. I said, we're going to probably scale down to a 2-bedroom apartment for about the next year or two. But I promise you, in the years to come, Dad is going to have you at a different place where we're going to be okay. But for now, in the in between time, I'm going to sacrifice everything we have to bet on myself to do this one thing that I know is going to help and really help me and help many other people later on. And over the years, since then, I've been able to, speak to millions of people through media and stages. And like I said, create a 7-figure business. So it was worth it. So those folks out there who are probably wondering, do I stay on this job and stay here because, I need to take care of my family? Yes, that's a priority for you. But know that there's always another option. It doesn't have to be either I stay here or I lose everything. Mm-hmm. How can you create another option? I even tell people, don't do what I did. I just simply left. I left. I'd say start off as a side hustle. Find you a side hustle that you're really passionate about. Build the business up. And then once you get to a place that you're comfortable, then take the leave. But don't sit there and think that you have to stay in a place where you're being dehumanized and not getting meaning out of, and you're not growing, it's not paying you well, and you don't have a life balance just to exist, because you want to go through life and find your purpose, your why. And, one of the worst things you can do is leave this place and not know your why and not serve the people who can benefit from your story.
Absolutely. Wonderful words. Thank you for that. And thank you for being an inspiration for myself. I can't say I hope. I know for the listeners who are listening into this. Thank you so much for your time and sharing this with me. It's been an honor. I'm not sure if you had anything else you'd like to share that I might have missed, or if you'd like to just do in closing anything that you...
I'll just wait to say these words again. Jasmine, I really appreciate you having me. Thank you for the work you're doing. Just for those listening audience out there, as you're going through, sometimes we look at challenges in our life and we say, oh, this is bad. But I want to tell you, though, sometimes adversity is a far better teacher than victory. So the adversity that you've been facing, whether it be in your past or even now, there's some things you're learning from that. So the question becomes, if I'm going to be resilient, you use the word resilient. People often think of resiliency as just simply making it through. That's a part of it, though. Surviving is part of it, though. But there's another piece of it that's called thriving. So you don't want to just survive. You want to survive and thrive. So how do you survive and thrive? You have to ask yourself a couple of questions. What am I learning from this situation? Or what did I learn from this situation? And then what will I do differently going forward? That's how you begin to thrive when you start talking about resiliency, because it's not just simply just making it out of it, though, but it's making it out, thriving, helping other people, learning from those lessons so that I don't go back that direction, and then taking those lessons I learned and monetizing and, just doing a lot to make a difference in our society. So there are opportunities out there. So for those folks who are going through different things, I want to let you know there's a better day going to come, and life rewards those who stay strong enough, long enough. Life rewards those who stay strong enough, long enough. So hang in there. Don't give up. Don't feel like you have to compromise yourself or acquiesce to, being average or mediocre. You can do great. And, God has put it out there for you to do that. He's giving you goals and dreams. He's giving you a story, giving you talents and skills. Utilize them. Don't sit there and sleep on those things and let the other people in our society go out there and maximize their dreams, and you sit back and become a cheerleader for them. It's time for you to jump in the game. Jump in the game of football. Okay, jump in the game of football. Jump in the game of life, and be a participant. Get out of the stands. Participate. Learn as you go. Okay, you don't have to have it all figured out. There's gonna be some things you're gonna need to learn as you go. But and I'll end with this right here. There's a principle called the corridor effect. Oftentimes, it's like this. So if you stand at a doorway, you look down a hallway, there are blessings, there are things out there that you'll never, ever experience unless you begin to walk down the corridor. And as you begin to walk down the corridor, there are going to be some doors that will close on you. And some people will say, oh, those doors told me that I'm a failure. Remember, success and failure aren't opposite ends. They're a circle. You have to fail in order to succeed, because there are things you're going to need to learn, whether it be on entrepreneurship or whatever it is you choose to do in life. You have to fail in order to succeed. So there are going to be some doors that are going to close. Those doors were meant to close on you, but there are going to be some doors that are going to open up for you too, though. And if you don't continue down the corridor, you'll never, ever get to a place where those doors will open up for you. And I'll end with this right here. It's a testimony. It's not bragging at all. When I left my job as a principal, everyone thought I was nuts. I walked away from six figures, like I mentioned before, but I stayed the course and kept going down the corridor. I kept being denied and was rejected, everything else. But I ended up eventually landing now get this, getting a contract with an organization where I worked 3 days a month. And they paid me $250,000 for 3 days a month. So people say, wow, I would love to do that, Dr. Watson. I said, but would you have been willing to leave six figures? But when you're willing to step out on faith, God would open up doors and bring opportunities to you that you never would have discovered until you begin to walk down that corridor. So for those folks out there to walk down that corridor, take your first leap of faith and actually reach out to me, T.A.Watson.com. Consider jumping to my $1 Million Business Pathway coaching program, making the investment in yourself, because part of this is you have to be willing to invest in yourself in order to thrive.
Yeah, take the ball and run, right?
Yes. Get in the game. Get in the game. Get out of the stands. Get out of the stands. Get in the game. Yes.
And I always use that same line every time someone says in an interview, what kind of personality, how do you tackle things? How do you deal with problems? I said, just give me the ball and I'm running. I'll run it. And
I may run the wrong way in the beginning, but I'm going to eventually run the right way. Just get in the game.
Exactly.
Become a participant, not a spectator.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Watson. This has been wonderful. I've learned so much from you, and now that you are in my circle and our journeys have come to a pause and a yield sign in our journeys, but now we are officially, we're on the same path. And I really, really, I think I'm so giddy. I just have so much admiration and joy to have you as a guest. I've learned so much. So thank you so much again, Dr. Watson.
Thank you for listening to Noise Palooza Zion podcast. And if you enjoy listening to my podcast, please don't hesitate to give me a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. Also wanted to give a shout out and thank you so much to all my guests, past, present, and future. And stay tuned for the next upcoming episode on Fridays.